Sunday, September 1st, 2019, Sunday of Labor Day weekend. This is our first Sunday of the month teaching. I am Harvey Aronson and one of the resident teachers, and I am accompanied by Anne Klein,
the other resident teacher.
And we are talking slowly in these first Sundays about what are called the four boundless states. They are equanimity, love, compassion, and joy. And they all have some very, very specific meanings in the Buddhist teaching context. And nowadays we're talking about compassion. And I was contemplating on the way over what to say about compassion on top of what I'd already contemplated. And really recognize that it seems that we are in and entering a period when there really is a need for more and more compassion. And part of that is that I think we're entering a period when there's more and more fear in the world. There's fear associated with shortages of food and water, shortages of supplies, energy supplies. There's fear associated with migrations of large numbers of populations. There's fear of the other. And when we think about it, we will certainly talk a great deal very shortly about having a sense of wishing to alleviate the fear of others. But we really do have to pay attention to our own fears and our own reactivity. It's actually easier to hate the other than to notice the fear that stokes that hate. And that can occur down to the microscopic interactions in our relationships. We all get very, very angry and hateful of the people we love. It's very, very easy to happen. Well, why does that happen? Well, because we feel and fear that maybe this other person doesn't love me, maybe they don't see me, maybe they don't respect me. It's very, very hard to get in touch with that. We'd much rather think my wife or my husband is a terrible person. Why did I ever marry them? They're a son of a bitch. I knew it all along. We've all been there. I mean, I'm not the only one who has a temper. Loses our minds when somebody disappoints us. We lose our minds. People disappoint us, and we feel that our lives are coming to an end. And it takes a lot, actually, to get in touch with the fact that we feel that our lives are coming to an end. We'd much rather get angry. We'd much rather get upset. And when we feel that our life is coming to an end because somebody is late or somebody looked at us wrong or somebody talked to that person rather than talking to me, or they gave that person an ice cream and they didn't give me an ice cream, But they gave that person a raise and they didn't give me a raise. It's very, very hard to move from the immediate reactivity of, I hate the person who's favoring, or I hate this person who got more than I did. Hate and anger are kind of anesthesias and analgesias. They moderate our feeling of upset. I know we have people here who are in the recovery community, and one of the big things in the 12-step program is avoiding resentment. And resentment is built on fear. Fear that I don't matter. Fear I'm not seen. Fear I don't count. Fear I'm not loved. And so in working with compassion, and especially in the modern era, it seems, we do have to spend some energy attending to ourselves and having compassion on ourselves. And that's not necessarily that easy. We've just done a whole course this summer on self-compassion, and it's available on video. You know, whether it be in the Christian tradition that we're all children of God, but we may not realize that, or in the Buddhist tradition that we all have Buddha nature, and we don't realize it. The reason that we are, in the Buddhist perspective, as messed up as we are, is that we're not fully realizing our Buddha nature. If we realized our Buddha nature, we'd be at peace. Perhaps in the Christian tradition or the Jewish tradition, if we were more in touch with our godlike inner nature, we'd be more at peace. But we're out of touch with that. So that in itself is a ground for compassion for ourselves. Our own suffering is a ground for compassion for ourselves. Can we take the feelings that we so naturally feel when we see some young child being hurt and turn that to ourselves and recognize that we ourselves deserve the same feelings that we often reserve for young children who are hurt? We're as deserving of kindness and compassion as the person who we see hit by a car on the street. Again, in our modern era, we're so oriented towards production and to doing that we may not pay attention to our own needs, our own very, very tender, deserving of kindness to self. And that's not a small thing, and it's something we will continue to always return to. Because as I myself just live with myself more and more decades, and as I work with people more and more decades, it's clear that we don't care for ourselves in a deep way. You know, we may buy a Rolls Royce and think we're taking care of ourselves briefly, but then maybe we drink 2 quarts of vodka on a weekend and follow it up by a little bit of fentanyl. Or maybe we're smoking. Or maybe we're eating chocolate cake until it makes us sick. Or maybe we work 14 hours a day and then eating French fries for 3 meals. Some variant thereof. Or chocolate chips. Or cigars. The way we don't care for ourselves is actually pretty profound and pretty omnipresent. And I invite everyone to be considerate of self. But that's not at all what I was planning to talk about. Uh, what I was planning to talk about was compassion for others. And, you know, we do live in a culture that's kind of interesting. We live in a culture that, in some core cultural way, worships individuality. And independence. I mean, it took a lot of independence to get into boats in the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, get in one of those damn boats, which didn't have any plumbing, really, didn't have any really good food, and took, what, a month or two to sail across the Atlantic to get here? Yikes. And even when my folks came and they were on boats, that was still about probably a week or 10 days to sail the Atlantic. My mother came for an arranged marriage that she didn't buy into. So she came all the way from Poland. She meets some guy in Buffalo, New York, who's paid her way to come from Poland. And she says, thank you, no thank you. I mean, talk about cojones. This is an independent woman. She was really independent. And we are a country of independent people. Took a lot of independence to move from Boston to the Mississippi area, and more independence to take off for the plains, and then more independence to cover the Rockies, and then to hit the Pacific coast. We love the image of John Wayne, you know, the lone cowboy is taking it all on by himself, or Annie Oakley, whatever it is, male or female. You know, our deep philosophy and our deep sort of constitutional principles are grounded in John Locke, who saw us all as these sort of like little atoms floating around with lots of luck. So, just to read you a fun quote from an anthropologist who was at the University of Wisconsin, but when we were there, we weren't smart enough to know that. Clifford Geertz. The Western conceptions of the person as a bounded, unique, more or less integrated motivational and cognitive universe, a dynamic center of awareness, emotion, judgment, and action, organized into a distinctive whole and set contrastively both against other such wholes and against the social and natural background, is, however incorrigible it may seem to us, a rather peculiar idea within the context of the world's cultures. That's a lot of words, but basically what he's saying, to think of ourselves as just like billiard balls, completely set apart from other billiard balls and set apart from the world, which is this like other. It's weird if you look at the world. This is not the way most people in the world consider themselves and the world. The great word in Buddhism is interdependence. And it's really a word worth meditating on. Our bodies are exquisite models of interdependence. You know, for a certain course I was involved with, we had to take an anatomy and physiology course. I actually recommend it for anybody. I mean, it was fascinating. They got down to the kidneys, and then into the kidneys, then there were these little hairs in the kidneys. And within these little hairs, there was the ability somehow to detect divergences in the pH, the amount of acid or base in the fluid of the body. And it's like, what the heck? I mean, if those little hairs are off, it sets off a whole cascade of misattunement, and we're going to get sick. And it's just like those hairs are detecting one thing, and then up in our brains, the cellular things and the neurons and the synapses and everything are detecting other things. If you think about an orchestra with 100 pieces working together, I mean, there are trillions of things going on in our bodies simultaneously that are all interdependent. And that metaphor is what's occurring on this earth. We are all interdependent. And when it works well, it's amazing. When a person in China, depending on their cow and the bugs in the earth, gets milk, so they can drink their milk, so they can go to their factory, and they can build this piece of plastic that goes into this thing so that I can know what time it is. And 5 trillion people have been involved in making the plane that the piece of plastic is transported to the United States in. We're all interdependent. Every person who had something to do with that plane, I'm related to. And every cow and insect that supported the milk and the blade of grass that's created the cow that supported the milk, that supported the Chinese person making the plastic, we are interdependent and interrelated. And so I want to give Anne a bit of time to talk. But
you're on a roll.
when they're impaired, we're impaired. When they suffer, we're going to suffer. You want to see it in real political time. We're now engaged in a mutual infliction of punishment with the trade war. Okay, guess what? We want to make you suffer. Guess who's going to suffer? We're going to suffer. You want to make us suffer? Guess who's going to suffer? You're going to suffer. It's interdependence. We can't do something without creating all sorts of ripple effects. And most of all, with the teachings on compassion, we want to really emphasize when we see ourselves suffer, can we really touch into that and appreciate this is what others feel? And as much as I don't want to be undergoing this pain, others don't want to undergo this pain as well. And this is a kind of source for our wishes that others be free from pain and suffering. But with that, I'll hand it to you.
So, a dynamic that we're seeing in what Harvey is talking about, and really a crucial dynamic in our own unfolding of development, is that the more understanding we have, let us say, of interdependence, the more deeply we can recognize the connections, the subtle connections that link us with the cow in China, the cows in India, everything and everyone. That's wisdom. That's a very significant aspect of what we mean by wisdom in the Buddhist traditions. Because that sense of interdependence, of connection, of linkage, of not being alone, of not being separate, that's wisdom, because that is very much in accord with how things really are, despite how independent we might feel and how much we might admire John Wayne. And as we can see in Harvey's discussion, what comes along with that wisdom, that recognition of our connection, not only our connection in terms of products moving around the world, but our very deep connection in a profound similarity. As Harvey said, as we often say, we know we don't want to suffer. We know that pretty well. And we know we feel really strongly about it. Everyone else is the same. Everyone else, everyone, all living beings are exactly the same in that way. So that sameness, from this point of view, is much more significant than the various differences that we have. We have differences. We're not the same in every respect. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to go hungry. We don't want to be in the path of a 5-cat hurricane. We get it. The people now on the islands are feeling, oh my God, 5-category storm is about to land. Whoa. Because we know what that would feel like. So the more we have this kind of recognition, the more generous over time we can feel towards others and ourselves. More generous with kindness, more generous with attention, more generous with our hopes for ourselves and for others. Because once we recognize this profound similarity between ourselves and others, our hopes for ourselves become the model, actually, for how we treat others. And that's another reason why self-compassion, care for oneself, is so important, because it actually models for us. People don't take care of themselves at some level. You can think about this among people that you know. Maybe there's also a kind of recklessness with respect to how they regard others. So self-care is important as a model for how to treat others. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So let's sit with, as we have this morning, what is this doing unto you? We can't just wait for others to do unto us, right? We also have some responsibility. So the theme of this, a big theme of our practice over months and years and lifetimes, is what we're calling the generosity of wisdom. Having some understanding of interconnection, interdependence, the wisdom of knowing the value of self-care has a way of opening to a natural generosity. Generosity oneself. I will take care of myself. I'll go to bed early. What an idea. Get enough sleep. Speaking personally, right? That's an important part of self-care. And then I'm going to feel much more kindly toward other people, because I'm not starving inside myself for food or attention or sleep. So that is why we have called our Teaching Tuesdays for the next season, the generosity of wisdom. We're going to be looking into the profound interplay between various levels of wisdom understanding and the kind of generosity that it opens. And this is also a theme for the retreat that's coming up in 2 weeks. That's really a dramatic example of the generosity of wisdom that we'll be practicing. So we invite you to participate in our Teaching Tuesdays. We feel it's a very rich, actually, offering that will introduce you also to some of the key teachings of Mahayana Buddhism in India, as well as in Tibet, all very gently. It'll go down easy. And for those of you who are already familiar with these themes, we believe that they will be enriched. So we invite you to join us. As you know, our Teaching Tuesdays are online as well as in person. Not everybody can get here. 7 o'clock. And not, should I say anything about what here means? Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Okay. And so we'll have a little break now, and then we'll continue by cultivating. Really, the ground for the generosity of wisdom is a little bit of attention, and that's what we'll practice, starting. And I'll give you 5 minutes, if you like. It'll start at 11:03.